The architect Charles Moore once described Disneyland as being a, quote, incredibly energetic collection of environmental experiences, which offers enough lessons for a whole architectural education in all things that matter. As to who designs these places, it's a team of talented individuals called Imagineers. Every discipline, from writers to architects to musicians, work together towards the goal of creating experiences. One of the legends of Imagineering is Eddie Sotto. A lifelong fan of Disneyland himself, he was responsible for, among other things, leading the design of Disneyland Paris's Main Street USA, an incredibly detailed reinterpretation of a turn of the 20th century Midwestern town. After that, he helped design other attractions for the Disney parks around the world, including the first modern trackless ride at Tokyo Disneyland. Outside the parks, Eddie was involved in renovating the restaurant inside the Pereira and Luckman designed LAX theme building and designing ABC's Times Square studios with collab architecture. In 2000, he left Walt Disney Imagineering to establish his own studio, where he used his knowledge of experiential design to create incredible spaces around the world. We had a fascinating conversation discussing architecture, highlights from Eddie's Disney career, and his future endeavors into AI. Hey everyone, my name's Steve, and join us for our conversation and watch as I try my best to imitate a competent interviewer as we explore the fascinating world of Imagineering. Enjoy. I'll just start with asking you how you got into it. I know you started out as a washing machine salesman at Sears, but how did
Well,
how
you don't
did
want
you
the
make
whole
the?
audience to leave now. You don't want them to leave now. You're just getting started. I don't know if I want to sit through a washing machine
Well,
salesman's interview, but it
but
was
it's
helpful. I
yeah.
have to say something about that.
Mhm.
So I did start out in sales. Got married at 19, and one of the things that's funny about that, you got to make a wage, you got to make a living, and it was a great education because I'm a self-taught individual. I didn't have a college degree, college education, so I went into sales, and they really do teach you about relating to people, understanding people. And I found that when I finally got into design or into art, or especially Imagineering, selling intangible ideas to accountants, that the art of selling and bringing someone into the idea really was the difference between success and failure. And having the skills of presentation, or just taking that enthusiasm and being able to convey it to an audience, or watch when they're bored and move on to the next drawing, or not show a blueprint plan they can't read, but show renderings and kind of learn how to talk the language of the client. How do you talk the language of the person you're sitting there? Michael Eisner was that way. And I realized when he first came to Disney, he couldn't read plans. And I watched the group in front of me presenting completely go down in flames because I could tell he couldn't read the plan and follow the ride vehicle through the ride. And so I actually canceled our meeting on the list and said, guys, we got to go back. I go, what does this man understand? He understands TV commercials. So he storyboarded a commercial for why you would go to the project instead of showing the project. And when we convinced him that people would show up for it, then he was more than interested in looking at renderings and maybe storyboards that take you visually through. So sales, and I think I was blessed by starting out in kind of retail, because all of this that we're doing, whether you're a student or adult, is retail in a weird way.
Right.
It's a
Yeah.
transaction, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's it. The way you put that in perspective, it really makes it seem like it's not that much of a jump to go from one profession to another because you're in the business of selling an idea, an emotion. Um, so
Completely.
yeah, so when you made the jump, you went over to Knott's Berry Farm. Was that was that how you started
True.
in the
Yeah,
world of
it
that?
is because you also learn too is that I knew that that's what I wanted to do on the back of the sales checks at Sears on a dead Tuesday. I was storyboarding attractions, and drawing the rooms, but I was always fascinated with architecture. And even prior to Sears, when I was 10 years old, I went on a walking tour of the 20th Century Fox movie lot. Now, my family had been involved in film. My aunt was a costume designer for Universal, Paramount, kind of you name it, for a lot of big movies. My grandfather was a scenic artist at MGM. So that behind the scene thing always appealed to me. So our family went on this little walking tour of Fox. And if you're familiar with a film called Hello Dolly. It was a Barbara Streisand musical, epic musical back in the days before computers when everything had to be built. And it was all architecture.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I love architecture. When I was a child, I wanted to be an architect, not a theme park designer. I wanted to kind of do both, but I was really in love with the architecture side of theme parks. So we go on this walking tour of the movie lot, and it's on the corner of Broadway and Fifth Avenue. That's the set where the parade is. This big parade. 1890 is the time period. And as the tour guide walked us down the street, and this is an epic size set, the biggest set in Hollywood in probably 50 years, when you got to the end, he turns us around and I looked back and it was all fake. But from the front, it was completely realistic. And this to me kind of blew Disneyland and David Copperfield and all of it away. And I said, if I want to learn to be a great designer, I told my mother there at 10 years old, I go, I want to meet the man someday that did this set. And I learned later that he did Cleopatra. He's the only guy to bankrupt Fox twice, as a
I
matter of
was
fact. Yeah.
I was gonna say, yeah, because that all became Century
Yeah,
City now. So
exactly. But he really was an epic designer. His name was John DeCure. And so I kind of grew up following and studying all of these set designers and how they designed the sets. But when you do sets, what do? You read the script, you look at the emotion in the script. What is this scene about? You design a physical place to mimic not just the function of the place, but the emotion of the script. Because the space is to communicate what's going on in the scene, from the lighting to everything else. How does that reach out? How does that do that? So I feel like the reason I'm become an Imagineer that's focused on architecture that really begins with an emotion is because it started at set design. And if you look at the history of Disneyland was pretty much designed by MGM and 20th Century Fox out of work set designers. It's a movie backlot with people in it that doesn't kill you or fall down or can be, used over the years. It's a permanent version. So yeah, I went to Knott's and I really wasn't able to get into Disney as a young kid. I begged them and all that kind of stuff. Didn't really work. And then I'm obviously zooming through this, down to the point where I called them and said, I got an idea for a ride. And they said, anything you can think of, we've already thought of. So don't call us again. Well, this made me want to make a 1 to 200 model of Disneyland. I became very serious. And that path, even though it wasn't direct, which is fine, got me experience designing attractions at Knott's, starting there. But I really started to learn the architecture because Knott's is based on real ghost towns and real places. You start getting research books, and that's what all the art directors told me to do: is do the research,
yeah,
no matter what it is. Really understand what you're on the shoulders of. Who are you standing on the shoulders of? What are you emulating? Bring a reality, and then take it into fantasy. Don't just do a photocopy of a photocopy or
right.
someone else's work.
Well, I'm really fascinated because you said you wanted to be an architect. Was that came out of more set design, you said, than things like Mies van der Rohe or Frank Lloyd Wright? Is that kind of how?
Well, I was
Like,
only like 9 or 10 when I said that, so I couldn't
oh,
pronounce Mies van der Rohe at the time. But my father took me on this. We went to see, I think in 1971, Charlie Chaplin's films were finally brought back because he was considered a communist or something, and he left the country. Anyway, they finally re-released those. So we go to L.A. and I was in Orange County at the time, and which is south of Los Angeles, but very suburban. We were living in sort of the Cinderella home suburbia world. And we go up to Los Angeles, and he was showing me Art Deco and Art Moderne architecture at the time. And he goes, Eddie, there's a time when architects kind of went nuts, and this is it was when it was in its ugly phase, like the 70s, early 70s, 60s, 70s. And he was showing me that. And he goes, these things go through these phases. And I go, uh-huh. He goes, but there's one man who really defies that. And that's to achieve the goal of being timeless. How do you do something timeless that people will always love? Because the architecture that survives is the architecture that they make memories at and they love.
right. I
Now,
think.
uh,
Yeah,
it naturally took me toward Disney
mhm,
and being an Imagineer because I could create emotional spaces that are kind of immortal. That people
right.
bring their kids back because the castle is the same. Or Main Street. I did Main Street with my team for Disneyland Paris. I was the director for that, and to me that was like the ultimate thing. But Disney, at Disney, they say, well, it's not really architecture; it's theater, and that is
Yeah.
true. It is theater, Yes, it has to be functional, but the funny thing is that the reason theme park architectural designers are not taken seriously, and I don't blame them, because there's a lot of bad theme parks, because there's a lot of bad architecture too,
Yeah.
um, is is because people think that you've just copied a book, something out of a book, and say, "Oh, well, that's Independence Hall," and they just copied it. There's no integrity there, but there's a psychological series of metaphors and subconscious design that's right below all that representational design.
Right. You know,
I mean, I would sit on the street of Main Street and listen to music on headphones like this in the 90s when there were CDs and put together music that was never faster or slower than the horses that were pulling the streetcars or the people that were walking. Because I wanted a reverse movie score where the person on stage or in the theme park is the is the protagonist because it's an unscripted space. Architects have come up with all these amazing names for themed architecture and decided they own it, like scripted spaces and stories, all this stuff, which is marketing, of course. But
yeah.
that's fine because they do, if it helps, it's good. You know, how do we get the emotion into it? That's kind of why I'm doing this. I mean, let's make spaces for people, you know?
Right. Well, yeah, you know, you talk about how you got into you were thinking of design, you were approached you saw Disneyland as kind of the that's what you saw as like really great design. And I came to that same way when I was a kid too. I mean, my interest in architecture really originated going to the parks. And mainly because you saw things that you I same thing. I grew up in a suburban home in Southern
Yeah.
California. You don't see French Gothic. You don't see
Oh,
you know, that kind of stuff. So when you go to a place like Disneyland where there's such a level of believability that you go and say, "Hey, you know what? This yeah, I get this." And you're right, there is an emotional connection. And when I was in
oh,
architecture school, they my instructors could not understand. I would talk about how, you know, if I became an architect, I would love to design something that was so emotionally impactful as the castle. And he just was like, that's not real." And I was like, "Well, the emotion is real, you know?" So I'm so glad you said that because I agree with that.
well, the funny thing is everything is symbolism. The castle is symbolism, and it, you know, it's not just a castle. There's a lot of miniature golf courses that don't have a line in front of them with a castle in it. Okay,
Right?
this is Sleeping Beauty Castle, and remember, every icon needs to do something. When you walk through the drawbridge of the castle and go inside of it, now you're going to step into every Disney movie you could imagine, from Peter Pan to Snow White to Pinocchio to Dumbo, Storybook Land. Everything is beyond it. So the castle represents a portal. But even more importantly, today, 1955, the concept of just being immersed in a virtual reality with a real sky and all these sets was a mind blower in the beginning. But now the castle is something you hand down because the parents are taking the emotion they felt at the castle and they're handing it down to their kids, looking in their kids' eyes and saying, "Well, did you feel that like I did?" Yes. Oh my goodness. There's you know, there's Moana or whatever it is, you know, there's Stitch or you're my favorite character. And those things are what makes it emotional. I feel like good architecture could be, and which it is, but you know, is kind of more like theme parks. And what I try to do is I don't. That comes out of the screenplay thing. You design moments. You don't design places. You go, here's the place. How's it going to work? But what do you do there? Where are the moments there? How do you find those moments? And so that's, you know, I'm writing about this now. I'm trying to put all this down, you know, and it can go off into the ether. But that's kind of the thing, you know, because remember, in the business of designing rides, it's like $100 million for a ride. Now, if you design a mall and half the places go out of business, they just put another business in there and nobody ever calls you about that, right? You design a ride and nobody goes to it. They don't forget that. You're not working again. So you have to totally be creatively convinced, even at the beginning, that what you're designing is going to work or that people will show up for it. So every color, every texture, I guess the point is everything matters.
Right.
Everything matters. This theme stuff is so delicate. Emotions are delicate. You can set it off, you know, with one little bad detail,
Right.
one little bad detail. can mess the whole thing up.
And I think it's important to always remember that you guys as in that realm of designing themed spaces, I mean, your main thing is the guest. And a lot of times you'll have certain, an architect or whatnot, where they're more of like, I have an idea, especially in the old way of like the modernists thinking of this is my vision, and people can be in it or not. It really doesn't matter. But with you guys, you're like you said, if nobody shows up for the attraction, then you something's amiss. Um, and
Right.
I
And,
yeah,
and I remember a very modern museum that was designed and by a very famous architect. And I went to that museum and I was a consultant to look at how to revise parts of that museum. And when I talked to the people that owned the museum, that were the client, they just said, well, all of this looks great, but it's a complete disaster to operate. Nobody can find their way through it. Nobody can get into it. Nobody can get out of it. There's no room for exhibits or everything else. I said, well, that's because you've been strangled by a vision. Now, the fortunate thing was Walt Disney was the visionary of Disneyland, and Walt Disney was the man who knew his own audience, and he was obsessed, kind of like Jeff Bezos is, with how much faster can we get the package to you. He's obsessed with pleasing the audience. He feeds on that, so he wasn't worried about that. I think Walt Disney kind of had his architect phase with Fantasia. So, well, here's this. I'm going to now be legit. I'm gonna go over here in this. I'm gonna go into the New York audience and try to do classical music and all that. But yet he was innovating. It just didn't work out. He just couldn't quite get it all there. But there is a difference. I think if your vision is, understanding those moments and how to structure them properly, even in a restaurant. I mean, we do a lot of restaurants. I'm doing two restaurants now, and it's to me, it's all about for this perceptual sequence. How do you meet it? How do you know it's a restaurant from the street? That makes a big difference. You don't
okay.
just bury the whole thing. Word of mouth, yes, it can work, but these
But you
days, some certain businesses, you got to make sure there's either outdoor seating or there's color or there's light. People go, oh, are there offices in there? What do they do there?
Yeah. No, yeah, yeah. So I want to get back as fascinating as all that is. I know we're going to talk more about like the theory and all that stuff behind it. I do want to talk about you mentioned Disneyland Paris. I would love to talk about how that got started, how you managed to make it um into that, and what was day one like when you first arrived at WDI?
Well, okay, so if you really want to know the story of day one, which is
Uh-huh.
a bit of a digression, but I'll just tell you I was intimidated because I was hired away from another company to do Main Street USA, which is the Victorian entry point of Disney, and later suggested putting, by accident, sort of suggested putting a hotel in front of it, and ended up doing some of the concept work on the beginning of that hotel. It ended up growing into this double-sized project. Anyway, so I was intimidated to say the least. Very proud to finally have gotten that badge, to work there. It was pretty much a childhood dream to get that opportunity. As I was walking in, though, people were walking out going to a retirement party, and I said, "Is there free food there? Because I don't know anybody." They go, "Yeah, sure. Can I come?" And they said, "Well, sure." So I went. I thought it might be a way to maybe meet some people, and so I go to this thing, and I realize the man that's retiring is a gentleman who very graciously in 1971, about 8 months before Walt Disney World in Florida opened, allowed my family to ride around in the back of his Chevy Impala on the job site before the project opened. And he was the PM for the whole project. So he stopped everything he was doing, put this 12, 13-year-old kid in the back with his parents, and he didn't really even know us. A friend of the family had bothered him about it, stopped and maybe gave us more than an hour. And he took me down that main street to see the thing being built as a kid. You talk about the Hello Dolly set and that. I
Yeah.
see this thing, I see the fiberglass going on it and the whole thing being built, the castle being built. Anyway, so that guy's there. And at the end of the retirement party, they had an open mic. And they go, "Is there anybody else here?" And I got up there. No one knows who I am. I don't know who they are. And I just said, "Well, I'm Eddie Sotto. I'm this guy. You remember taking me on that tour when you were super busy and being so nice?" And he goes, you and your family, your dad. I go, "Yeah, I know. And I said, "Well, you really inspired me seeing that Main Street being built." He goes, "Well, what are you doing here? Why are why are you here?" I said, "Well, I'm here to design the next one for Paris."
Oh man.
And the room just went quiet. So sometimes these things you asked about the first day. That's what I remember about my first day at Disney, was thanking that gentleman for being so kind to be generous like that.
Isn't the
But
world works like that in some ways, you know? It's just like you see the Hello Dolly set, you have that tour, and then you just make it and you're
right.
getting to make it real in your own vision. Was when you were developing this, was there kind of an edict from management that was like, "We're gonna build," and what was that? Was it
Okay, the edicts were there's two edicts. One, in order for it to be contractually compliant, it had to relate the project in its way had to relate to French culture. Because they're putting a Disneyland in and it's an American Main Street, it's called Main Street USA. They were saying, well, maybe you should change it to, this and that and this and that. Anyway, so there was always that. But there was also the idea building in Paris was foul weather. And there was a mandate as well to create weather protection. Now, when you're creating weather protection, Main Street is scaled down. It's not full scale. It's 9/10 on the first floor. It gets smaller in forced perspective, like a movie set on the subsequent floors. Creates a feeling of charm. Well, if you have to build full size canopies out over the sidewalk that defy scale, it destroys the scale of the facades. So the first thing was, how do I create walkways and disguise them like a movie set would through buildings and make the buildings look contiguous? Then we decided to do arcades, which are like you would find more in Europe than America, walking arcades behind Main Street in case it was pouring rain. So we had to create all these new weather protection things. But the biggest problem was story. I said, well, why would anyone in France understand or care about a Victorian Main Street? Because to us, it's a quaint small village, but France is nothing but a million quaint small villages with a fantastic city called Paris in the middle. And we've stolen all the architecture from Queen Victoria and Charles East Lake and everybody else in the book, you know. And Michael Eisner comes up and goes, "Well, I just want to see this is all American. There will be no mansard roofs." I go, you have to realize that most of our existing drawings that I was told to copy have mansard roofs. You can't play that game. We have to find out what's American about it and be culturally true to ourselves. So I started studying Edward Hopper. I started looking at other artists and designers and saying, how can we bring American culture without being political into the street? And the first thing my boss, Tony Baxter, said to me, we were talking to each other. We discussed taking the time clock of 1890 and turning it up to 1920. Tony goes, that would be a better idea because one, I came from Knott's Berry Farm where we had a roaring 20s area, which was enormously successful. So I knew it worked in the USA. I thought, well, jazz was a new music. Josephine, it was the first time, as Tony says, that Europe was looking over the fence at what's going on over there in New York with the skyscrapers and everything. I said, yeah, let's kind of make it a little more Chicago. Let's put speakeasies in it. Let's do some things that'll be just on that French side of noir, but still not lose our innocence. Make it fun. Keystone Cops versus the Untouchables, right? So that went on for a year. We designed an entire Main Street, and then Michael kind of got antsy about it. He thought, well, no, we should probably stick with the formula. And I turned in something that was double the budget. We had elevated trains in it. I mean, everything. It was fantastic. And he was, not only am I a little worried about taking a risk with this, it's also too expensive. So we didn't end up doing it, and we went back to the main idea. But I still kept a lot of those American essences, which was creating a lot of graphics. America is about consumerism. So this Main Street, I showed Tony the Hello Dolly set. He agreed with me, and I go, "This is what I want to build. It's something kind of like the Victorian Hello Dolly set. It's more realistic, a little bit more textured, and yet optimistic, like a musical." And Tony goes, "I know, Eddie. I was there the day after you because I am an extra in the movie."
I've heard that story. Yeah, that's
I go,
wild.
"What? You're an extra in the movie?" Anyway, so all of these things went into that. But see, at Disney, color psychology is a big thing. So I thought, how am I going to get these people to relate to this American Main Street? And when I was traveling in Europe, I'd see colors that bothered me, like lime green plastic chairs in front of gorgeous Italian cafes. in like the Cote, in like the Italian Riviera or Portofino or something. It isn't all bistro chair. So I was like, things like that. I'm thinking, wow, these people have a different color sensibility. So I decided to try something. I thought because I think Europeans are a little sensitive to stuff that's overly cloying or cute. It's got to be a little more sophisticated. It can't be babyish. And this is the introduction of the park. So I went to BHV or BHV, the hardware store in the middle of Paris. Went down in the basement and asked for the color decks of all the historic restoration colors they use on historic buildings. And we're talking about stuff you'd find in England like oxblood maroon, almost black greens, deep blues, eggplant. I mean, and then these gorgeous creamy grays you would only see in a Disney animated film, but they have them on buildings and railings. I mean, these are colors you just melt when you see them. So I got all these decks and I went back to Imagineering. I said, we're going to redo the facades in these colors. Same psychology. If it's a white, it's going to be that. If it's this beautiful gray, it might want to be closer to this. We did the first deep, rich facades like Main Street Motors, which would be a car dealership run by a bunch of Victorian gentlemen. Well, it's going to be deep maroon with lighter awnings and red pinstriping. We did the steam trains the same way and almost I even looked at colors off of Packards, 1940s Packards that had these gorgeous automotive paints because they don't look like colors you see today. So when people subconsciously look at it, they go, huh, that does feel antique. I can't put it's the Gladwell tipping point thing when people go, huh, I can't tell you why it looks like an antique, but it is. It's not just, because I'm very sensitive to all the stuff in catalogs today. But anyway, that's you asked about kind of how we approached it
Mhm.
and putting all that music in. We had 11 hours of music, and I think most main streets only have two,
Right, yeah.
but it's all different music in different spaces. So Scott Joplin is featured in one area. We wanted to feature a lot of African American jazz, as a part of the fabric of America. That it's more of an immigrant story. We even stained glass windows. They couldn't have American presidents as cameos. We used inventors back then, and this is the early '90s. But we tried to keep it apolitical and make it about culture and make it about. We used patent models and exhibits, museum displays, and the Statue of Liberty because people would want culture. They'll feel guilty if they're bringing their kids into something vacuous or empty. If they saw museum exhibits with plaques in Main Street, then they go, "Well, this is good for me. This isn't a
Right.
carnival. I'm okay with it." And actually, in the first year, people would spend 2 hours on Main Street. They didn't run to the castle. They'd actually sit and read all that stuff, which made us feel really good because we worked awfully hard. So
Yeah.
there you go.
As someone who's been to Disneyland Paris, I can definitely get that 2 hours just exploring. I was so amazed by the just the interiors. I mean, I know every main street has their interiors, but there's a sense of real authenticity and just richness. I mean, there is a personality with every single space, and so I definitely you can see that work that was put in and the passion
Well,
for it as well.
well, we did this. It all starts with the screenplay thing. So we said, who would have owned this business? Well, we had one Disney Clothiers was going to be owned by a seamstress who was doing tailoring and then branched into retail. So her home had the walls knocked out and then turned into a retail store, but her fitting her bedroom still serves as the measuring and fitting area or tailoring area of it. Well, we leave all that in. Now, if you know who owns it, then you begin to think of perhaps their color schemes in 1890. What would they have picked? Now, the budget guys came in and said, "Well, you have way too many moldings in here, Eddie. This is just you're having a riot of moldings in here. How dare you?" Because they would just look at all the lines on the elevations, and they would just judge it. Oh, cut half of that. I go, well, can I have wall covering? I go, yeah, you can have all the wall covering you want. Just get rid of those moldings. I go, just give me three. Give me a wainscot, like a chair rail, a frieze, and maybe a crown molding or something. Okay, you can have that. That's minimum. I go, okay, good. But the wallpaper's okay. And they go, wallpapers. So then this company just opens in San Francisco. Your listeners can go look at this place, Bradbury.com or Bradbury and Bradbury. Now, these guys in San Francisco took original plates of original San Franciscan Victorian wall coverings and reproduce them with gold leaf, with metallics, with trims. with corner blocks. I mean, you name it. This is the most complex wall covering you'd ever seen. But in the elevation, it just says WC. So it went right through the Disney filter, unnoticed until it got to the French interiors people that write the schedule. So so we got all this amazing stuff. But I was proud because it was real, and we had a wonderful team. We had people from the movies. We had our interiors director was Sandy Mullally, who had worked on Camelot and Paint Your Wagon. She came from cinema. She was a set decorator. We had prop department that would actually prop the interiors out. One woman went and bought literally collections in San Francisco from cable car collectors. So our cable car bake shop would tell the story of San Francisco, right down to hanging your coat on a piece of real rail out of the cable car system or ringing a bell from it. I wanted, the idea with fantasy is people keep subconsciously saying, you know, maybe I'm really not an 1890. And they go, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to turn over this rock and see if there's something 1890 under it. And when they do, and they look at it and it says 1888, they go, oh my gosh, it's still real. The spell is still there. So we would try to do that. The manhole covers on Main Street were from the Smithsonian. They were real artifacts from 19th century towns that had to be good examples of cast iron design. So those were there. So we tried to make every little thing in the interiors. We had a rule. If it wasn't worth one of those clicks on those wet film cameras where you had 24 pictures at 36, we shouldn't be building it because our competition is Paris.
Right.
Rent control in Paris will blow your mind. I mean, you can't outdo museums you go into for free on Sunday. The Opera House for free on Sunday is you can't fight that war. But what you can do is fight it with ideas, with story. So I used story with our team and said, how are we going to tell these stories in unique visual ways that don't compete with Paris? It complements it.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah. And part of that is like you said that there is it feels like there's a story there. I want to talk you mentioned a little bit about the hotel. This was when I was a kid, was the thing I wanted to see was the Disneyland Hotel in Paris because it was so
Really?
far removed. Oh yeah, because it was so far removed from what I was used to at Disneyland or Walt Disney World. And someone who grew up near San Diego, seeing the Hotel del Coronado, but then seeing it on this, much larger scale and more whimsical and stuff
Yeah.
was just fascinating to me. Could you talk a little bit about how that came to
Yeah.
be and how?
It's a weird story. Okay, so this remember I mentioned weather protection that
Mhm.
people had to be protected from the elements. Okay, so they did, and back in the days before we had online and cell phones and mobile ordering and things, you would wait in line at a ticket booth, correct? You would stand, like you would in an old movie theater. Well, Disneyland would have ticket booths arranged out front, and huge lines would form in the morning because you buy it. There's no reservations. You buy it on the way in. You just get there early, right? So the mandate came down that we're going to have to cover all these people. They can't be seen on the newspaper or television, waiting in the rain with an umbrella to buy a ticket, shivering. No one will go if anyone sees that. Okay, so we had designed using Del Coronado sort of as an inspiration because there was the Grand Floridian as a big roof, a big, obviously with pitches to it, not just a flat roof, but a big series of beautiful roofs. And I thought, God, this is just deadly. It looks horrible. It's just so deadly because you're going to be so far away, you won't even be able to see the railroad station. We're not going to be able to get that feeling. This roof is killing it. So I thought, why don't we just put one level, just a floor of suites up there, kind of like Club 33, which is a private club at Disneyland that you buy a membership for. So let's just do these. Let's just do these suites. And so we did maybe 1 to 2 stories with nice, modest roofs, very much in scale with the main street that's there, and with little towers to break it up, just to kind of give it a sense of place to it. You're entering a pavilion, not just a roof. So we show this, and I guess the number came in like $80 million, some outrageous amount of money. Michael Eisner just goes, guys, we can't, what are you doing? And I said, well, what we can do is we can make this kind of like a hotel and put some suites up here and maybe get some return for it. And one of the board members, I guess, was Gary Wilson, who worked with Marriott. And the idea came about to say, well, why don't we do this? Let's make a full blown, let's go. If one floor is, it's like Dumbo. If one clown is, if it's funny falling off the ladder from 10 feet, it'll be funnier, 10 times funnier at 100 feet. It's like, let's just go higher. And it scared me to death. I was heartbroken. I was like, oh my gosh, you've just destroyed the scale of this toy village in front of it. So Dana Aiken, who became the architect on that, I did the original concept elevations of the hotel. Actually, I have them myself. Original concept. I've posted them before. All the concept elevations. Jim Michelson did a beautiful illustration of it. It made it more fanciful. Nina Vaughn illustrates it, and Dana comes in as the architect. And I said to Cameron, "So we got to find a way to do muntins on the windows and create a sense of movie set scale, especially from the park, that this thing looks further away. We gotta force these windows to not look full scale. We can't have that. They've got to have some relationship. So we created a little bit of distance there between the station and the hotel. We tried to create a little bit of that so it looks like a distant silhouette. And then we rewrote the story for Main Street, that a railroad had built a railroad hotel like you do in the East, like they did it at Brighton or Atlantic City. And then the amusements in the town, like Coney Island or those Atlantic City, it grows around the trolley stop or the rail stop. And so that seemed logical because there's the train station, there's a hotel, and we put the railroad logo everywhere. And so, well, that's going to be our logical story. And as we work our way into the park, that'll be the story for Main Street. It grew up around a tourist community because it's pretty elaborate, given Walt Disney World's origins for what it is. So, um, and there's paintings of that in the Plaza Inn restaurant. There's in the Plaza Gardens, we have paintings of people on great lawns with balloon ascensions and things.
That's yeah,
So
that's
that was a little bit of the hotel. I mean, I was just talking to a retail person who made the clock. If you go to Paris, you can buy the hotel clock as a
oh,
desk
nice.
clock. You got to
Nice.
go
Oh,
see
that's
it. It
oh,
sells out every day. They put them on the shelf, they're gone.
I believe it.
And
Oh,
the controversy around if it was going to be a Mickey Mouse clock or not.
oh, because
We
yeah, I'd heard
definitely,
about
yeah,
this. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So we did do the Mickey Mouse. John Hench had to approve the Mickey Mouse. He's our senior 90-year-old Imagineer. I did the formatting in the hands, and actually the Dorsey clock inside of the Dorsey is a little bit of the inspiration with the way the dials laid out and stuff. So we had a little French culture everywhere.
All right. Yeah. Well, I'm kind of curious about how. So you're working on from like a design as more of a concept designer at in that role, kind of with the hotel, and then you turn it over to an architect. How does that? Are you sitting there with them, kind of working on it? So it's not like a hey, here's the sketch and just send it over. You guys are working in
In
tandem to.
in that case, it was a bit of a handoff because it's a giant hotel, and I'd already done all these elevations that pretty much set the tone for it, and they just adapted all of that. When I got into the rooms and all the floors, I did not get involved in that at all, or interiors. I would have loved to. I would have loved to, but there was just the scope of that falling at the last second was huge. On Main Street, though, I mean, I got right down to we had an architects there. I don't have a degree in architecture at all, but I do profile the moldings on buildings. I profile interior cabinetry. I mean, I do hand drawings and elevations of things. Like I would give them if you want, you could even post these things in your interview if you'd like. Elevate. I'll show you what a concept elevation looks like, and then and you can see the final. But I just want to control it. Frankly, I want it to look proportionately. Movie sets have a
Right.
thick and thin that feels very Disney.
Mhm.
So you have to do the engineering of the structural in a way that allows you to do fanciful columns and things that don't look like these big over-engineered pieces. They have to look spindly like a wedding cake or meringue on a cake. So
Yeah.
we even brought in 80 or 80-year-old set designers, flew them into France from Warner Brothers to work on just getting the buildings just right. So
That yeah, that level of detail is just that's insane. It's crazy.
well,
It's so
it's
good.
it's crazy. It's kind of crazy. It took
Yeah.
5 years to do the whole thing, but
I this is kind of on a side thing, but I've always been fascinated with the other hotels that were built with them and that they were all kind of these prominent starchitects, for lack of a better term. Was there because you were designing the front of the the land that touched the rest of the resort. Did you ever have any contact with any of them? Did they ever say like, "Hey, we don't really want that hotel there because it's going to ruin Frank Geary's shopping village," or anything like that? Was there?
You know, I'm trying to remember that. I feel like once Eisner approved it and it was going to be themed in part of the park, I think it was pretty much left alone. The operators didn't want it. Dick Nunis, famous, worked with Walt Disney operator, fought bitterly to not have it there at all. He thought it was going to ruin Main Street. People were going to put their underwear on the balconies and you're going to see it from the park. And he had all these kind of problems with it. And it turned out, other than Michael Jackson almost dropping his baby off the balcony, that was probably the only time anybody really cared or looked up there, But um, they didn't. There was quite a bit of, uh, you know, uh, I would say evolution going on, between all these architects competing to do different things. Robert Venturi and it's funny. A lot of these visions. It's funny. The Disneyland Hotel vision. Yes, it's evolving now. They're redoing the interiors to be princess themed or something, but the exterior stayed the same. And it's funny, these sacred architects, and I thought they would never change it because, I mean, Antoine Predock, he had an interesting vision for the Santa Fe, or Robert Stern's Western Hotel. And I thought those things were pretty, you're not going to touch that. That's Robert Stern, you know,
Yeah.
they would certainly touch the Eddie Sotto and mess that up because they do long before you would ever touch anybody who had credibility.
Mhm.
So, but they put Pixar characters in the Santa Fe. So I don't
Yeah.
know how long they've stayed with it, but it was fun to meet those gentlemen, and they're
Yeah.
wonderful. Yeah, I mean, they're incredible talents.
Yeah.
And they
Did you?
come up with they were trying to be very creative, so they came up with some very outrageous things, especially for Florida. I mean, I went to the Michael Graves meetings when the Swan and the Dolphin were proposed, and some of those very postmodern things that we look
Yeah.
at now and go, wow, that's, very Depeche Mode of you. So,
Yeah.
but I don't know. I bought his teapot, so
Oh
I
yeah.
was a
Yeah.
believer, I guess.
Oh yeah.
I had his watch. I had his Mickey Mouse watch. You
I'm
know.
my first trip to Disney World. We stayed at the Swan, and for weeks after I was drawing the dolphin pyramid and all those things. I just
Yeah,
was there's a
yeah.
sense of whimsy to it that you know. And when I went to Disneyland Paris, I was like, I gotta see the Hotel New York. I gotta see all the little things that he threw in there and stuff. So it's so fascinating that you guys were doing that and you guys were doing really just incredible work. I mean, when you go through Disneyland Paris, it just is amazing how much detail there is. And then there's this other coin of it, another side of it, where you've got these really well-known architects doing their stuff. It's just kind of this really interesting kind of cultural um collection there. It's just such a fascinating
Well,
place.
I have to thank Michael Eisner and Frank Wells for this because they stood behind us, believing, of course, it'd be a financial success, that it wasn't, at least not initially. Now, actually, I think it just brought in 56% of the income of all of the overseas parks. It's responsible for that, so it's doing good. Um, However, Michael and Frank were very bold that way. Michael's edict, even in Florida, was if I'm going to build some spec building or I'm going to build a building for an administration building, why don't I just why don't I roll the dice and see if it turns out to be a wonderful, great building? Michael coming from New York and so forth. Well, fine. Let's let Robert Venturi try something. Let's let Frank Geary do the administration building at Disneyland. Then it'll be a noteworthy building. Why are we just building boring boxes? Anybody could do that.
Yeah.
Let's get somebody good, but give him the same cheap budget I would give to someone else. Let's see how creative these guys really are. And see that was the Michael Eisner, I think, difference in it, that he was willing to try to elevate things and try things. And I think some of it fails, frankly, at Disney, some of it succeeds. But what I love about any of these efforts is they're all true to themselves.
Mhm.
Every building is seamless within itself. Like the Graves work, it's excellent at being Graves work. And same as you could say for some of the others that are out there. They're a complete vision. I like complete visions, whether I love them, like them, or dislike them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Was there last question kind of on the Disneyland Paris stuff, was there any animosity within Imagineering of kind of like why aren't we doing that? I mean,
Oh, yes. Are you
yeah.
kidding?
I imagine, yeah,
Yes.
no, I'm
Well,
always
is the
surprised.
public really coming? here's the difference. I think in Europe, in France, you can get away with Anton Predoc's Santa Fe thing. You cannot get away with that at Walt Disney World. People don't look at it that way. We're born and bred that people, and it's kind of funny, they're changing the hotels now to make them more Ritz Carlton like, I guess, or more, they're making it more like the real world and less themed. They're getting rid of all that theming. We don't want that. And I'm thinking, well, you just don't know the audience. The audience is paying a premium for that. They'll even have pay Four Seasons prices without Four Seasons service to get the theming, to be immersed in another world. They're coming to escape something. They don't want to escape back into the place across the street. So yes, I guess there was a cultural animosity, never towards the architects or fellow artists. It
Right.
was like, well, really? And then you kind of go with it. I looked at it, well, this is Europe. I think it's cool to have a cultural collection of American design with an American cultural statement called Disneyland. I
Right.
always thought it was the biggest cultural export next to the Statue of Liberty going the other direction that would ever be there. So it better be really good and rich and not just an empty, mailed in cookie cutter thing. So I'm happy that, frankly, that they did other architects and other unique experiments in there and other designs. I think it gives Europeans, I think they really like that, I believe. And I was reading some Twitter feed things on my feed, people mourning that they're putting Pixar characters in my Antoine Predoc. I
Yeah.
miss the vision of his. See, so there's people that appreciate that. I
Yeah.
certainly did. I thought the Clint Eastwood thing was cool, and
Oh yeah, that was
maybe some of your, you could look up 1992 and some of these things and see their way of telling a story, which I thought was fine.
it's yeah, I mean just I
I
know
certainly
we're
drank there a lot. I'll tell you, they had a good margarita bar. Oh, it was the only thing open while we were building the park was to go into that margarita bar, and I was covering two shifts all the way up till opening. So you're working 14-hour days, and so that's the only place you can get Mexican food and tequila without driving back to Paris.
yeah.
So
Yeah, no, those yeah, especially Hotel Santa Fe, there's that detail, and the Sequoia Lodge too, they're
yeah.
just really in detail. Um, I wanna so after Disneyland Paris is open, what kind you Disney ends up buying, ABC in Capital City, and then how did where what did you do in those years or months after Disneyland Paris? Were you working on other projects, or was it
I was worked on
yeah,
Indiana Jones for Disneyland and the rehab of Adventureland for Disneyland. Worked on adding Space Mountain, FedEx into Space Mountain, and putting onboard audio onto Space Mountain. There's a variety of things that happened, kind of between that. We had targets on our back after Disneyland Paris because austerity, because it wasn't doing well, was the thing. So theming, oh my goodness, we would never build another one of those. God forbid there be another Disneyland in the world. So, we were not the flavor of the month. So Tony Baxter, being the kind gentleman he was, my boss, we had five designers for the park, and he was the senior over all of us. He came in and said he kind of wanted to protect me, put me down there at Disneyland. So I started doing Disneyland things, and frankly, I was just kind of getting bored. So I said, I want my own studio to develop things with your other new acquisitions like ABC, ESPN, and so forth, like doing ESPN hotels or doing other, brand extensions. I want to do other things. We did a restaurant at LAX, the first kind of gourmet restaurant in the theme building in the Luckman Paul Williams theme building there. And so I was doing all of those things, trying to break out a little bit. And they started including me in meetings with television executives. And they
wow,
said, well, good morning. We're going to put you in a creative meeting, Eddie, with TV executives with nothing to do with building anything. You're just going to be, we just want your creative thing. And I wasn't the only one. There's a few other guys in there. So we go into these meetings and they said, Good Morning America has lost like 4 rating points against the Today Show. You had Katie Couric smiling over there at NBC, and Bryant Gumbel or whatever. So it's losing. What would you do to fix it? So I had a little studio of people that I could explore anything I wanted to with a tiny budget. That was what they gave me when I came back, called the Concept Development Studio. And so I said, okay, our team, we're going to be ad executives. We're going to go up against Chiat Day. They go, what? We're going to rebrand that Good Morning America show and come back to them. So what? But because we built places, we came back and said, you know what you guys need? You need something on the street like the Today Show, because Today Show's on the street. You need Cafe ABC, which will be a themed restaurant where all the celebrities that were in the show before they leave sign a tabletop, and so you could actually dine there and go to Cafe ABC, and we'll do cooking demos live with the audience in there. So when there's a cooking demo, you're actually giving it to people in the restaurant. Yet you also have a newsroom above. So there's a big glazed newsroom people could see where the whole, typical Good Morning America thing, that all happens. And then next to it, or part of it, is this cafe. Home run. They just go, oh my gosh, that will kill NBC. I go, yeah, you get Emeril Lagasse and Wolf and all the star chefs of that 90s, of the 90s. Get all those guys in there. You're going to have a line down the block for this. So they go, well, that's, Columbus Circle. I guess that's where we could put it. So it ends up, they go, well, Columbus Circle, this is too big for that. Too big for that. We're going to do Times Square. That's where it is. Let's put the cafe right there in Times Square and all of this, and then we'll put the studio. I go, put the studio with the people. No, no, no. We don't want that. We're going to put it above. And so we kind of work it out, and we start
Was
laying it out and working with them.
was this a part of the whole revitalization of 42nd Street in the Times Square area? Was that
Okay,
that
well, that was going on with another group, and we went to the New Am that was down there. We saw the New Amsterdam Theater, beautiful job. But Disney was very much looking at these downtown areas like that and saying, what can we do? And this cafe idea was really, really great. Well, of course, the TV people do TV. They don't do bacon and eggs and, chicken and waffles. So slowly they keep making the cafe smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And then who's going to run it? This, da, 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 and is it a set? They pretty much just want to do what they want to do.
mm,
So it sort of turns into this two-story studio. But what is it going to look like? Now, the funny thing is, because it's on an upper level, reflected light is a big issue. Now, there was a gentleman there who did ABC Sports who's extremely powerful. Roger Goodman. He was kind of the director, the tech side of the ABC News Group at the time. And so they're like, well, what is this going to look like? And part of the edict of Times Square is you can't go in unless you have a sign. So I can't remember the name of this artist, but I went to New York, and I was meeting with people there with ABC, and I went to MoMA or something, and there was an artist who had an installation of just red news zippers, they're called, where the words go by.
mhm.
Like we used to always be there. To me, that was the iconic language of Times Square, is these electric light bulbs, transmitting these words. Of course, we have the internet now. I was looking at that, and she had them, on this wall and stuff. And I was looking at that, and I thought, you know, I hate. How do you stand out against all of these signs in Times Square? Why don't we go the opposite direction? I thought, why don't we take the news zippers and twist them and bend them as liquid? We're going to make them all liquid and make them twist and have them bent. We had tried them square and different size, twist them and bend them and make them elegant and make them in motion. Like news is active, like news is alive, And looking at that. And so, again, like you say, you work with an architect. So, CoLab Architects, Mark Engberg of Oregon, and David Gabriel and Lawrence Coe were the three, but Mark is the principal there. He and I were friends, and we had already worked on some Disney projects together at that time. He was an in-house consulting architect. I said, Mark, can you work on this? And so we collaborated on it. I will say that. I mean, I was conceptually responsible for it, but we collaborated on it. I kind of finessed the curves, and Mark is a very patient person with me, as we did that, and then embedded the screen. And I said, well, the vision of this guy. So I went to Michael Eisner. I said, Michael, this is media as architecture. What if the internet could look out into Times Square, and people on Times Square could see into the internet, and the building is just a window into those two worlds? It's going to be, we're going to do what we call convergence design. And that, okay, that got his attention. He was like, well, you have to build a building. Yeah, but what does it look like? So we had a whole, and management sat on me, and I had to do 100 different versions of this. And Michael got sick of looking at versions. He goes, which one do you really like? Because why are you showing me these things? I go, because they're making me show you these things. And he goes, well, just show me the one you like. And I go, this is the one I like. He goes, well, that's the only good one. Let's do that one. So we both chose that one. I had to show it to Robert Stern, and the windows are angled.
Hmm.
And I wanted glass windows that would bend with the building, but because of reflected light of the TV cameras, they all had to be this angled thing. And Robert Stern looked at it. Michael made me go to Robert Stern, and
Oh.
Michael Stern goes, "I hate those windows. Get this out of my face, Eddie." I'm thinking, "Thank you, Robert. Tell me how you really feel." And he goes,
Because
"Those, I hate those windows. Those windows are horrible. You can't do that." I go, "Would you do me a favor and call ABC and tell them they have to find another way because the windows are killing our building here?" Well, nobody would do that. Roger Goodman was the nine, and then finally Michael goes, "Look, we're actually doing. If we get 2 rating points for this, it forgives any money we've spent on it. It doesn't really matter. Fine, leave the windows are as they are. It's an incredible building." Michael was in love with it. He and I still speak today, and he goes, "Every time I go to New York, I think of you when I see that building because I love it." And so here's one thing we learned though, which is very interesting, is Susan Bonds, who's the project manager, really producer of it. She made it happen. We had to write software because no one had ever done this before. There were also no LED buildings in Times Square. This was 1999. I was pushing to get it to be the very first LED building. We had Condé Nast, I think, might have got there almost exactly at the same moment. I mean, it's within days. So we had an LED screen because we I wanted the whole thing liquid LED, but we did the zippers, and the zippers are up there, and there were two programs. One, all the text would move at the same speed on all the zippers because all the zippers were different lengths. If you can imagine that, it's undulating. I said, well, wait a minute. If you vary the speed of the words, let's try that. So the words would travel at different speeds across it, and it becomes hypnotic. So I would go into Times Square when we were testing it and watch people on the street looking at it. And people would stay there for like 5 minutes reading it, just following it like a tennis match, reading it. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. Let's go with software B, the hypnotic version, to create this hypnotic thing. But we had to go to the city, and Giuliani had to look at it. And they were afraid it was too much of an attraction. That's one reason the cafe wasn't there. They thought, well, now we're going to have mobs, and we don't want that. And so we ended up pitching advertising in this idea that turned into a building. So go figure.
that, yeah, and the re the main reason that's so interesting is because you do put the media, the zippers within the design. It's not just that it's on the side of the building like the old zipper on One Times Square. It's a part of the design. So
It
you're
is it
yeah,
is the design. There is
yeah,
nothing else. I
right.
think they put that square of a monitor in because that's all that was available in 1998 or nine.
Mhm.
And then Sony had it. But I loved it one day. The weather comes on, and there's the weatherman standing in the middle of Times Square, and his backdrop is the weather map they put up on the building. So the zippers are doing the weather. He's doing the temperatures, and the building is performing behind him. So it becomes a performance piece. So to me, it was sort of mission, no matter what the windows looked like, it was still mission accomplished because it turned into something kind of breakthrough. And I'd hoped to do when I left Disney shortly after that, and like the right after that project, I quit and started a convergence design firm with a software developer to look at how we could do to blend the internet with physical buildings into our media as architecture. And unfortunately, 9/11 hit within a year of starting that. So all innovation stopped, everything stopped. I stopped. I ended up at MTV writing television shows, creating TV shows, and doing airplanes like you see here, uh, and Ferrari dealerships, and creating Aston Martin dealerships, and these wild, uh, very branded showcases, doing brand showcases, I guess you said.
Now, when you were working on this at the time, did you think like this is going to change the industry? I mean, this could be the start of something really,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, but it was too far ahead of its time. So we were going to do this DNA shaped media sculpture inside the Kodak Theater that David Rockwell had designed. And I think I don't know how he felt about it, but he told the Academy, absolutely not. It will not be a piece of art in the thing. And Kodak had already spent a ton of money with us doing it. because they thought since they're sponsoring it, they could put their thing in, and it didn't happen. So we had about five or six different projects with everyone from Motorola to all these leading tech companies, but all the innovation stopped overnight. And we just said, well, we don't know when this 9/11 thing is going to be over. We're just going to, we didn't go bankrupt or anything. We just said, we're going to park the bus for now. And I've just now brought that company back. It's called Progress City. But now we're blending AI with media and architecture. And
So,
so
yeah, yeah,
my
could you?
software developer I was working before now has become a causal analytics expert in working with AI. So we're starting two R&D projects and progresscity.com. Right now it's just a front page, but we are back. We decided it's the perfect time to come back into architecture, come back into all this and taking what I know about theme park design and placemaking, stadiums, things like this, and bringing it into sports design and stuff like that.
Well, yeah. Do you? So, where do you see this going? This idea of incorporating media into the built environment. Where do you see that going, especially
Well,
with
I
AI and stuff?
well, I mean, right now, what's going on is media is more or less assaulting you. Okay. There's no dialogue between you and the media. Like there are there's artsy exhibits where you walk by, and of course the color changes to acknowledge you, or all the little pieces. I mean, these are beautiful art pieces, but they're really not long term meaningful. I think that media as architecture is like, how do you blur the lines? How does the building sense you're having a bad day and then alter? How does the building become more of a mood ring? And that's kind of where I'm going with this, because we design emotion. I mean, I basically interview clients for an emotional profile and design to match it. And then fortunately over the years developed a certain amount of psychological trade secrets and tools that we use to to get a predicted result. That's how we get the restaurant business. They say, well, I want a romantic restaurant. Okay, well, let's use everything we know to do that. Let's look at where you parked your car. Let's look at the sequence. Let's break it down. And so we have a unique process in that and how we do that. But I'm not out to change the world or anything. I just want to have some fun, and do
Right.
some meaningful, interesting things and learn. I learn every day, and a lot of this is already happening out there. I can't
What?
say I'm the only guy. I'm some big genius out here, saying, "Oh, well, I'm breaking all this new ground. I just want to join the party." I felt left out there for a while, so
Well, yeah.
we were
That's
too far
what's
ahead of our time at Progress City. That was the problem. Is that the robustness of monitors and of LED, the price points weren't there yet, but we were designing gorgeous, gorgeous sculptures for World's Fairs and stuff. And now everything's caught up. So we said, what? I think it's okay to get into the AI. Is going to help us bridge that human gap in a sensitive way, not a way that is anyway. You
yeah.
know,
You know, and along that same line, do you think though that it'll be? Do you see any kind of negative? You talk about the way the screens kind of seem to are they're all in your face. Do you ever see there be a negative impact to having so much screens both in our
yes,
person and
it already is.
hmm
It's bad now. It's really bad now. That I mean, not everywhere. Obviously, there's beautiful things and not beautiful things. But when you go to uh, a restaurant or bar or something like that, now even a fine restaurant, you have a $62 steak and there's a TV right over you, or there's media over you, or all these things are kind of in your face. Um, to me, it's like, well, wait a minute. Um, there's the guy who comes. The media should be like the waiter. You ever been in the middle of a conversation? You're almost to the punchline, and the waiter walks right up and goes, "Would you like another cocktail?" Right in the middle, and interrupts your story.
hmm
Okay, so I believe that the best use for AI is based on causal analytics and observational research, not just impressing you that it sounds like a person. So the smart waiter knows when to walk up. The smart waiter knows when to let you finish your business conversation. Have the guy said the check will be in the mail tomorrow, and let him finish saying that, and then you go, "Oh, excuse me, may I have a cappuccino?" Or maybe you look a little bit concerned, like, "Well, gee, I think I'm getting antsy. My wallet's out. I want to go." Okay, that's when AI should sense those things in a polite way and nudge the environment, not push it in your face. I mean, those are the kind of things that I see. And then next time you come in, it already knows that maybe you're one of these guys who brings their clients there, and you do have long lunches. Maybe not every time, but at least it knows that.
Right.
Doesn't know you personally, doesn't invade your privacy, doesn't go after your politics or shame you or something. Whatever the people are concerned about today. It's it basically another good person in the room. It also enables real humans and helps nudge them toward talking to you. I think one of the big problems with devices in our theme parks is you've eliminated cast member interaction. Here, these people have been trained to play a role in a show and smile at you and make you feel good and say, "Hey, can I help you with that?" And instead, you go to the app. You only go to them like a Genius bar. So now you've isolated the audience from the entertainers or the people that are there, the cast members, and usually your most memorable times is when that person went out of their way to go, get 5 paper towels to clean up for your kid, or to help you, or to do something, or to get that extra double stroller you needed that they thought they were out of. And in other words, brands are known when people go the extra mile, not the machine.
Right.
So you never
Right.
want to forget that. At
Right. And it
least
looking
that's my opinion. These are all just opinions. I could be wrong, but that's
no, I
that's
mean,
my sense.
but I think you make a good point of that it should be not it shouldn't be this flashy thing. It should be something that it just enhances the the human element of it. And going back again, you were talking about emotion at the beginning of this, and I think it's it's kind of the same through line all through all of these projects and things, that at the heart of it, it's about people, and it's about making things a little bit nicer and a little bit
Yeah.
more exciting. Um,
This isn't
eh,
that hard. All you have to do is watch the TV show Cheers. People want to go where everybody knows their name. I mean,
yeah,
okay, pretty much. If you travel anywhere, whether it's a Disneyland or Luxembourg, people go and they take pictures of the architecture. Check yourself. Taste the local food, not the tourist food. I want to taste what is the local food, and they want to feel an interaction with a legitimate person, and kind of feel accepted or feel loved or feel welcome. And so I spoke in Scotland about this once, where people were very, very negative about themselves. And I said, the best person in the audience out there is this gentleman in kilt. Would you please stand up? And the guy stands up. I go, you know who this guy is? You don't even need me here to tell you anything. You shouldn't have flown me out here. This guy can tell you everything he knows because he owns a bar here and he owns a coffee house here, and he has currency from all over the world taped on his ceiling. He has Polaroid pictures of everybody who's ever come in here, and he welcomes them in his kilt, and they love him for it, and they come back year after year for that. It isn't that hard. People just, all you need is love. And so machines can do a certain amount of things. It doesn't say in Cheers where everyone has your app. It doesn't say
right.
that. Maybe it will soon. I don't know. But
Uh,
all of that stuff just takes us further from each other and understanding each other. And Walt Disney's philosophy was basically people are okay if you just knew more about them. It's kind of like peace through understanding. So if you never meet anybody and you're siloed in your own virtual reality of your own opinions, you'll never see another opinion. You won't ever grow. Um, I remember a French person in a bar coming to me and saying how bad, Disneyland Paris being this cultural Chernobyl, that, it's this horrible thing, and that you're stealing other people's culture. And right outside the bar is the Place de la Concorde. I go, do you see that obelisk out there? We. I go, you know where that came from? Came from Egypt. You know what it is? It's not a monument to the obelisk and the people of Egypt. It's a monument. If you go look at it, it's a pictogram of the engineering feat it took to take it down and erect it, to steal it and put it here. So everybody grows and learns, and nobody thinks about that. We think it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful. It could have been a different obelisk, but I guess the idea is that, noodles turn into pasta. We all learn from each other. Everybody shares. And so part of this whole thing of architecture and everything else, buildings play a role in that. Places play a role in that, in people coming together and sharing and doing it in a reassuring way. That's why plants and trees are important. green is important. It means life, and that everybody can agree on that, you know?
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, I your career's really given you just all of these wonderful, uh, this wonderful understanding of space and people and stuff. It's just, it's wonderful. And, I really appreciate you coming on and talking, um, about your career and about all these things. And,
There's a
and
thumbs up that just
I
popped up.
noticed
Was it in
that.
your
Yeah.
brain? That was
I
kind
guess
of funny.
so.
I don't know what you're doing there.
I have no
Don't
idea.
reveal all of your thoughts. This is a family program here, you
Yeah,
know.
apparently.
So,
Um,
yeah.
that's
That
weird.
was wild.
That was.
I think
I'm
that's the AI in your machine. I think the AI likes the show.
Yeah, I guess so.
Maybe I went a little heavy on the cheers thing. Sorry about that,
No,
Mr.
no, that
Computer.
was no,
No,
it's perfect.
no,
I'll tell you something.
no.
I've been a fan of yours for so long, and getting to sit down and talk with you, it just, oh man, it made my month, made my year. It's
Oh,
incredible.
oh
Um,
well.
and just all the stuff that you
Thank you.
did, yeah, and all the stuff that you did, Design Paris, and then afterwards, I just, I really appreciate you talking about it a little bit and all that.
Well,
Uh,
if your audience wants to learn more, or somebody
yeah,
wants to, heaven forbid, hire us for something
yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
consider us, Sotto Studios, Sotto Studios, plural, .com is our website where you can tour all the insane things we've been working on over the years, some of which were discussed on this program. And then Instagram is Sotto Studios forward slash, or no, Sotto Studios LA, or you can search Eddie Sotto, Eddiesotto on X if you'd like. And I think the name is Boss Angeles there, you know. So that's mostly Disney stuff. If you follow Disney history, things like that, that's a good place for that. I kind of keep all the Disney stuff in that corner.
But man,
But thank you. I mean,
oh yeah,
I am always enjoy talking about these things, and really, I'm always looking for an opportunity to talk about Mark Engberg and Collab Architects, or architecture, and what they've done because it really is their building. Did the concept work on it and so forth, but um, it's something I love collaborating with Mark and his group, and we've done many projects. Mission Space, that's their project.
oh,
Um, the giant suitcase in Tokyo. We could talk about that sometime. And Bon Voyage,
oh yeah,
worked on that with them as well. So I couldn't pick a better architecture firm to work with and be inspired by. So
yeah. Oh well, definitely, Eddie. I've got to have you back and talk more about that stuff because
well,
I
you
don't
ask
want you
your
to.
audience first. Maybe
Oh
they're tired of washer salesmen.
no, no, they love this stuff without a doubt, and especially just looking towards the future and stuff about what you're doing in the realm of all of media's architecture and stuff, all of that. I mean, it's a new frontier, and we need people like you who have this experiential. That it's not just about a building; it's about everything, and
Yeah.
you bring it to the table, and people are going to want they do love hearing you, and they're going to love hearing more about what
Well,
you've got coming on.
our little progress, our humble little front page for Progress City, because we're just in the middle of some R&D right now. I can't share it anyway, so it's kind of a specifically vague page, but it talks about me and my software partner there. And I'm going to put more about him up very soon. If you're interested and want to follow Progress City, you can certainly go to the contact page and send us an email. We will put a interest list together on what we're doing, and if people have inquiries about doing some unique things. So yeah, but we got some great projects going on right now, and there's an art series coming out this summer called The Land That Never Was, which was that 1920s Main Street Michael Eisner
Oh,
canceled. They gave me the chance to finish illustrating it. So there's six big drawings along with a series of postcards, about 20 postcards of all the rough, loose art. It's on my Twitter feed. You can see at least a little sneak of it. But that comes out in July or summer or something. I don't know when it's going to come out. They haven't said me the exact day, confirmed it. But that's going to be coming out as a limited edition and then an unlimited postcard set, if people want to follow that and get a look at what that's going to be like. So that's exciting. That's what's going
it
on
is,
for
yeah.
us in the near future.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah. Oh, I love. I've seen some of those concept arts, and especially with the elevated train and stuff. I mean, yeah, that was such a missed, kind of a sad. I mean, sad little thing
Well, they
that never
built it
came.
at Tokyo Disney Sea.
True.
Steve
True.
Kirk, who was the designer there, came back and goes, "Well, I hope you're happy. We're going to do the 1920s urban thing at Tokyo Disney Sea with the elevated train and everything." I'm like, so I guess it was nice that Disney built it. I can at
Yeah.
least talk about it because it got built, so I can't get spanked too hard.
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
anyway,
Well,
well, thank you so
thank
much,
you.
man.